Attention! People of Earth! You're polluting the galaxy's only water planet! Listen now to a special edition. Plastic Change and Modern Viking Heroes of the Sea.
Ahoy! Tony Milazzo, you are live and on board from Marina del Rey Harbor in California, and I have a special edition of the show, and it is Plastic Change, and I have the founder with me today.
Oh, thanks a lot, Tony, and thanks for inviting us to your show. I mean, my name is Henrik Beha Pedersen. I'm Danish, and I have been founding the organization Plastic Change as my best way to come up with an answer to the growing plastic pollution we see in the world's oceans. And I'm happy that we are here today and that this is actually peak of our expedition that started 2 years ago from Denmark, and now we are here in LA. This expedition, what we call Expedition Plastic, it's one of our major initiatives. From the start, our aim was to bear evidence. I mean, to be out there and bear witness to the problem on open oceans. So actually moving via a ship and to go out in the gyres where we see most of the plastic and document the issue. And what we do while we're sailing is that we are inviting scientists on board the ship, so they get a lot of samples home, so they can work further with all their scientific documentation in the laboratory after our trips. So we had scientists on board and been collecting data on how much plastic pollution we have in the oceans for the last 2 years.
Great.
And one of our partners is actually 5 gyres. It's an institute that is based here in Los Angeles. And a big inspiration has been Marcus Eriksson, who is the science director at the 5 Gyres Institute. And we're sharing all the data. And with that data, he's able to make up a picture of where is the plastic in the oceans, how much is there. And that again gives people the possibility to act on the issue, and that's been on a deeper level. That's the whole mission, that we can change this problem in the future. I have 3 sons at home, and this is my best answer to the next generation.
Sitting to my other side here is Chris Jordan, photographer, cinematographer. You have Midway coming out, right?
Yes.
I'd like to piece this together. So how did you get involved with the founder here?
Well, I have been making photographs that are about mass consumption for quite a few years. You know, giant piles of plastic bottles and cell phones and crushed cars and kind of the detritus of human mass consumption. And a few years back, I got interested in ocean plastic pollution. I learned about this problem from my activist friends and ended up on Midway Island in the very middle of the Pacific Ocean, photographing and filming this stunning symbolic tragedy that's happening out there, where this tiny island in the very middle of the world's largest ocean is covered with the bodies of tens of thousands of birds whose stomachs are filled with plastic. So I'm going there making a documentary film on this subject, kind of celebrating the beauty and majesty and magnificence of these amazing creatures, and then on the other hand, sort of holding in balance the horror and the sadness of this tragedy that their bodies are filled with plastic. And through putting that work out there in the world, it found its way to Henrik, and he gave me a call and said, "You want to come and sail across the Pacific with me and do some documentation and really experience the Pacific garbage patch in person?"
Yeah, it's a pretty big soup bowl, huh?
Yeah, well, it's a really interesting phenomenon. It's a little bit like global climate change, where it's a hard thing to see. You know, there's some number of hundreds of thousands of tons of plastic in the Pacific Ocean and in the world's oceans. And if you could be like a magician and lift it all out of the ocean into a ball that would hover in the air, it would be the size of Mount Everest.
Wow.
But it's spread out over 60 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean, and it's little tiny particles that are always breaking down into smaller and smaller pieces, and they don't float right on the surface. You know, they might be a few meters down, and so you can't take a photograph of this issue. It's like this invisible phenomenon, but we know it's there and it's making it into the food chain.
And we can't just even go pick it up. There's no way to just pick it up if it's like that, right?
Yeah, well, there's a common public misconception that it all swirls to the middle into a kind of giant floating island. And if there was such a thing like that, then you just go out there with a big scoop and scoop it all up. But plastic behaves in the water the way smoke behaves in the atmosphere.
Wow.
Like it's concentrated near its source, and then it spreads out and spreads out and spreads out. And by the time you get into the very middle of the Pacific Ocean, you barely see any of it. So we aren't going to find like masses of plastic. We're going to be dragging a net behind us and and pulling in handfuls from what looks like the clear crystal blue Pacific.
Now, I watched your video. That's actually the trailer for Midway, the film, right, that I watched the other night?
Yeah.
Wow, what a feeling came over me. It was kind of a dark feeling, and my stomach was sick, and I said, what the hell have we done? My first thought was, how do you turn something like this back? How do you turn the clock back? How do we change this now? It kind of felt like almost like, wow, this is heavy. We can't change this. But we can change this, right?
Well, yeah, and it's really amazing to be hooked up with Henrik and Plastic Change, because I believe that these changes have to happen as kind of two steps. The first step is we have to be motivated to change. And the way we change is when we feel something. If we get angry enough at the damage that's being done to what we love, or if we feel our sadness, if we really connect with our sadness for all that is being lost, like when we really feel something, that's when we act. And so I sort of think of that as my role as an artist, is to help people connect with themselves,
Well done,
with their
then.
own self on a deeper level, and just remember that we love our world, that we love the fish and we love the oceans, we love life and the magnificent miracle that we're all a part of. And if I can help people on a collective level connect more deeply with what they feel, then a guy like Henrik, who's a person who's offering solutions and offering people a kind of empowerment to do something, then he reaches a huge audience of people who are ready to make a move of some kind.
The timing is incredible. When did the organization start?
The organization started 2.5 years ago, and we've been on this expedition for 2 years. And while we have been out on sea, we have also been doing our homework, you can say. I mean, lots of the material that we produce while we're sailing, that will end up as, for example, an exhibition. It's supported by the Blue Planet Aquarium, Copenhagen, and also the US Embassy in Denmark. And it's going to be a traveling exhibition, traveling in the European countries, ending up at the next Our Ocean Conference in Malta in 2017.
Wow.
So all the stories, all the images are going to be told in different European countries. And we also have another very talented documentarist on this tour, Erika Serena, working out of the Safina Center. And she already has some good agreements with the major American media, so that we know that there will be a nice spread of all the work that we do. And also a part of the homework is that we take all the stories and all the work we do, we take it home and we bring it into learning materials, so that high school students in Denmark and the whole EU, they will be able to learn more about this whole issue. That's for me really promising, because I believe we need these young, smart brains with the new green technologies. They will make this their way of living, because they will teach us in the future how we could have done this much smarter. I mean, we had only 60 years, we had this party with plastic, and now we have this headache. We have the hangover coming out of the plastic party for 3 generations only. And if you look at our history, it's amazing that we've been able to pollute our air and our water bodies and the soil to that extent with plastic. So now we have to make the turnaround. And I think the cooperation here with Chris and with major partners like UNEP, with partners like Our Ocean, that's really promising for the future.
Oh, I'm glad you're doing this. You're bringing large awareness. You're seeing it right now, right? Is this thing, are you seeing it snowball and the numbers grow and the attention, you're seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, today, I mean, we got more donations from people who just came by on their stand-up paddleboard, or they came by just walking, and they gave us donations. I mean, they gave us some new fishing gear, or they gave us a small amount of money. In any ways, many ways, people, they support us. Yeah, you support us with the donations on a very nice arrangement, the event here and the yacht club. So we see so much interest from people who want to know more. People are ready for a more sustainable living, I believe.
I mean, I felt the fever. You can't help to get on board. It started small with just first contact with somebody from you, and as it went on, more people, it just grows. It's catchy. I hope you know I'm not done. I feel like part of Plastic Change now,
great.
And whatever I can do, whether it's on this radio show, Shout from the Highest Mountain, or go out and pick out plastic, or help people cut down on plastic, I'm there.
Great.
And I sure hope the rest of the humans on this planet, one by one, get in line and do the same. Especially after Chris's movie. Just wow. When you realize that we've done that kind of damage to our ecosystem in such a short amount of time, it's incredible.
It's really astonishing to go to a place as remote as Midway Island. It's basically as far away as you can get from a continent anywhere on Earth, and to find this incredible tragedy happening there. It would be a different thing, if you went to Staten Island, Fresh Kills landfill right outside New York and found birds whose bodies are filled with plastic, or even a couple miles off the coast of Long Beach. But in the very, very middle of the world's largest ocean, it's like the Earth's alarm system going off.
Now, this expedition, is this your first expedition on a ship?
Yes, it's the first time I'm ever going to be out of sight of land on a boat. And it's been the number one item on my wish list of things to do in my life for the longest time. I couldn't be more thrilled to be setting sail tomorrow.
This probably will make some changes to your photography and your life. Are you ready for that?
Well, I've heard from a few people being out on a boat either makes you sane or makes you crazy, and I have a feeling I'm gonna fall in love with it and want to do a lot more.
All right, Chris Jordan, the photographer, never going to be the same after this. You're the founder of Plastic Change. People are going to be curious what your background was before this project and how you came up with this.
Oh yeah, thanks for that question, Tony. My background is I've been working on environmental issues my whole life. I mean, it's been the travel in my life regarding different environmental issues. I've been working with toxics, for example. I worked with chemical cocktails of cocktails, and I had this education as environmental biologist. So I'm really a specialist in how chemicals leach out of consumer products, and how chemicals they become a problem for the marine life in nature and for ourselves. So I'm very much into, for example, some of the softeners that we use in plastic. I mean, when we create plastic, it's basically a polymer that we are adding different substances to give it its special feature. I mean, a water bottle must have a special surface to be good for containing water, etc. I mean, we make plastic, for example, for televisions that must be protected with flame retardants, not to start burning. And so we add a lot of chemicals, and those chemicals we now see in our own bloodstream. If we were testing our own blood now, we would find some of these plastic softeners in our blood. And it's coming to us via the food chain. And when you look at the issue of plastic pollution, it's definitely a huge source of those chemicals that we now see in the food chain and we now see in our own blood. So
it's in everything, huh?
It's in everything, but it's reversible. I mean, the thing is that we could just really be a bit more tough on industry. They're ready to move. I mean, they know this is an issue, and they don't want to see all the plastic in the ocean, so they want to cooperate with us. And if we're a bit more strict with the industry and the standards, then we can reuse much more of the plastic in the future. So we lost the view on plastic as a source. I mean, we just think plastic is something that is a part of consumerism and that we can throw out and then it's an easy fix. But it's a valued material. It's pristine oil that we're taking out of the ground and we're then creating a product out of it. And then we're losing it out of our mind. Maybe we're burning it off, but it's a very short value chain if we just make a plastic product and you burn it. So we need a whole new plastic economy. And that's what we're working for. We're working for the bigger changes in the longer run.
And they are cooperating? You get a great reaction from these companies? People want to change and go green?
I want to tell one story, and that's about the personal care products and all the small pieces of microplastic that are added to toothpaste. I mean, imagine that the kids for years they have had this toothpaste, and the blue line of small particles, the red line of small particles that when you glue your toothpaste on your teeth brush, then you see these colored lines. And that's microplastic. That's small plastic particles that are colored. And it's been very easy for industry to use microplastic in that way. But now we got a ban in the US on every microplastic in personal care products. And that's, for me, we're working on that ban too in the EU. And for me that shows that consumerism and that we start thinking about how we use plastic, it really has a future for us all, and I think that the industry also gives in and say, yes, you're right, that was not the perfect place to use plastic. We should really substitute with something more natural that is able to break down in nature. That's for me a good story about that. Now there is an opening from the industry that we maybe shouldn't use plastic in all these applications we do today. We should use it smart in the future, and not unsmart like in personal care products.
I didn't even know until I heard your presentation that there was plastic in my shampoos and soaps, and I know there was chemicals, but I didn't know there was plastic.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I mean, we are in Hollywood, so everything out here is plastic. It's a plastic city.
Well, there are many uses of plastic. Look at the contact lenses. I mean, I wear contact lenses. That's a smart way of using plastic, but I just don't have to dispose it in the sink. I mean, it must be disposed right, and for example, so that it doesn't end up in the oceans. And because if it goes down the drain, it will diminish into small particles, and it will be a part of the ocean plastic in the future.
So part of the plastic change, a lot of folks begin to think, oh, I'm not going to stop using plastic, I like plastic, I use plastic this, plastic that. And you're hearing it, folks, that it's a matter of what you do with your plastic. Where you put it, how you dispose of it, whether or not it gets recycled, where it ends up. I'm curious to see some sort of video or an animation of the piece of plastic's point of view and where it goes from the day it was made.
Well, and one of the strange things about it is if you could follow a piece of plastic from, it starts in the ground as oil or liquid natural gas, gets fracked, and then travels in a truck to a place where it's refined, and then from where it's refined it travels to a place where it's turned into these things called nurdles, which are basically, it's like raw plastic. There's these tiny little balls of raw plastic, and then the companies that manufacture stuff like plastic bags or plastic silverware or plastic bottles, they buy the nurdles. So the nurdles go in a train maybe all the way across the country or even across an ocean to the place where it's manufactured into a plastic knife or fork or spoon, and from there, from that factory, it gets on another truck and it goes to our supermarket where we buy a box of plastic silverware or plastic straws or plastic bottles, and we drive home and eat one meal with this plastic fork or sip one drink with a plastic straw, and in the garbage it goes. And then from there, there's lots of different ways it can make its way out to the ocean. So there's this really strange, incredibly inefficient whole kind of culture that we're in about disposable plastics. And that's one of the things to really understand about plastic is that there's nothing wrong with plastic. Like, plastic is not bad. It's an amazing substance, and there's all kinds of stuff that we can make from it that we couldn't make out of anything else.
Right.
It's just that the disposable plastics and the single-use plastics that are it's just kind of a crazy habit that we got into, and now we're realizing that there's this tremendous cost that we're all individually and collectively paying in the destruction of what we love, which is creatures in the ocean and the health of our environment.
Right.
Well, and this is another one of the aspects of plastic that's just so interesting, is how long-lasting it is. And, from a kind of poetic point of view, you can think of plastic on a kind of meta level. You can think of plastic as our collective unconscious manifestation of our fear of death. It's like we want to be immortal. And so we create these things that are immortal. Plastic water bottles, there's something that feels safer about drinking water out of a clear plastic bottle than drinking it out of the tap. Like when you drink it from the tap, you don't know where the water's been. And when you look at that fear that we have of drinking water out of the tap versus out of this perfectly clear, clean plastic bottle, it's like our fear of death. And so we have this immortal substance that we're using one time and then putting it into our environment where it lasts for who knows how many centuries and continues to cause damage in all kinds of different ways to the complex living system that is our own life support system, as well as the life support system for birds and turtles and all the creatures that we love.
I think that's a really good point, that it's our own life system. I mean, it's where we pick up our food that we are damaging now. I mean, we test fish in Denmark, and we see in many of them we see plastic now. We just tested herring. We found plastic synthetic fibers from textiles and more in most of them. So it's our own fish. I mean, I love fish, so I really want to protect our fish and our oysters, etc. And they are filtering all the water for us in a smart way, but they're also filtering all these particles and all these synthetic fibers. So now we get it on our dinner plate. So we should really stop and say, hey, hello, I mean, we love the earth, we love the oceans, we love the fish, we love the birds. I mean, we shouldn't reduce that good, that human good in the future and for our sons and daughters. I mean, we're basically giving them a burden of plastic as a gift. I mean, so I feel a huge responsibility in regard to showing my sons and the next generations that we can make this, we can make a U-turn on this issue and be much smarter in the future. I mean, it's just so stupid what we do. So I think that most people really agree if they knew. Many people, they don't know, but the most people, if they knew, they would agree that this is not so smart. So we should really change direction. I think there will be a human movement in the future to change this, because we have what we see today. It will be doubled in 10 years. So today we are littering every minute one big truck of plastic. There will be 2 big trucks of plastic in 10 years, and in 2050 there will be 4 big trucks of plastic every minute. That means we will have more plastic than we'll have fish in the oceans in 2050. And I think that's enough for people to know. I mean, then we need to make a change.
Chris, you came on the project now, going on the expedition. What were you doing just previous to this project? And has it helped you segue? Is that kind of where you're same direction you're going, or changing your direction?
Well, before joining up with Henrik and Plastic Change, for the previous, what's it been now, 8 years, I've been working on my film and my photographing project on Midway Island. And that's part of a bigger kind of arc that I've been looking at for a very long time, which is about mass consumption. And what I'm really interested in is shifting consciousness. In one way, you can look at a problem, like you can point out into the world, out into the physical world, and point at a problem like ocean plastic pollution and say, that's the problem out there. We have to solve that problem that's out there. And in one way, that's true. And in another way, the deeper root of the problem of ocean plastic pollution is not out in the ocean. It's inside our consciousness. It literally lives in another dimension, which is the dimension of our mind and our collective mind. And that's where I'm interested in trying to make a shift. Because if you can change the story, we all live in multiple stories. If you can change the story, then you change the world. And so as an artist, that's what I'm interested in, is like, how do you shift collective consciousness and help our culture make wiser decisions? So how do we connect with our collective wisdom? And I think art has an important role to play in that process, because one of the roles that art can play in our culture is to help us connect with what we feel, to kind of reconnect with our humanity and with our selfhood and with our mammalness, on a just kind of deep, visceral level. Just remember, what do we love? Like, what really matters to us? If all of the plastic bottles in the world all disappeared and we couldn't drink water out of plastic bottles anymore, would we feel something? How much would that matter to us? Versus if all the sea turtles in the world were gone, if the dolphins went extinct, would that matter to us? And so art can help us remember what we feel, remember what we love, and in that place, we're home. We're reconnected with the deepest part of our self, our soul, or whatever you want to call that. And from that place, we have access to our wisdom, and then we can make new choices that are consistent with what we really care about.
There's a few things you said the other night that I was unaware of, and I'm a sailor, and I've been drawn to the sea since a child. My heart is at the sea. And I didn't realize a lot of things about the Pacific Ocean. We're in Marina del Rey Harbor here on the Pacific Ocean. Can you go over a couple of those things for the listeners?
Yeah. The Pacific Ocean. Well, first of all, the great ocean of peace. That's what Pacific means. It's the word peace. And it's called the Pacific Ocean in every language. And so in Japanese, it's a word in Japanese, but it means peace. And so it's this vast area of our world that we call the place where peace resides, in sort of a mythopoetic way. It's the most beautiful name. But the Pacific Ocean also, it's by far the largest ocean on Earth. In fact, all of the other oceans in the world would fit into the Pacific. And all of the lakes and rivers and glaciers and all the other water. The Pacific Ocean holds half of the Earth's water. Wow. And to the listeners out there, we don't get to see globes very often anymore, because we're all electronic these days. But next time you see a globe, go to the globe and turn the globe until you can see the Pacific Ocean, and you'll see just how enormous the Pacific Ocean is. It's 1/4 of the Earth.
Wow.
And when you put your finger in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's the furthest away from a continent of anywhere on Earth, including North Pole or Antarctica or anywhere. Right where you put your finger in the middle of this vast, vast, deep ocean, there's that island called Midway Island, which is covered with the bodies of tens of thousands of albatrosses whose stomachs are filled with plastic. And it's such an interesting thing, because of all of the possible birds it could be, it could be Pacific pigeons or Laysan ducks or whatever birds filled with plastic. It's this legendary creature that has 1,000-year history in our poetry and our literature as a harbinger of changing winds and shifting fortunes, and a carrier of messages. And so it's like a poem coming from Earth herself, just reminding us of what we have forgotten.
Something interesting also you said the other night during the presentation that I didn't realize, that these birds don't have enemies, don't have predators. Sorry,
yeah.
yes, they don't have predators.
Yeah, and I mean, there are very few places in the world where there are no mammals. And in the Midway Island, that way out on that Hawaiian island chain, is one of those places where there's never been a predator for millions of years. And so all of the birds that live on this island have no fear of humans. And it's the most astonishing experience to be able to walk out into a field of hundreds of thousands of albatrosses. And these birds they're as big as eagles. They're huge and incredibly magnificent. And you can walk out into a field of hundreds of thousands of them, and not only do they not run away and fly away like birds do everywhere else in the world, they actually come toward us. They're curious. And so from 50 feet away, you see them looking at you like, what's that thing over there? And they start coming closer and closer until they'll walk right up to you and like nibble on your earlobe and like nibble on your hand and come up and check us out. And so for me, it's a spiritual experience to be with them with these amazing sentient beings, and at the same time on the other hand, to experience the tragedy that they don't know. They can't know that the plastic is killing them. They don't know why their babies are dying. They can't know what plastic is. We're the only ones who know that. And to be with them and to see an albatross who's choking to death on a cigarette lighter, and to be with the babies as the babies are dying in their nest and the parents are grieving the loss of their baby, and to know that it was us that did it and that they can't know that, it's an incredibly powerful experience that brings up grief. And when I first went there, I had never really experienced grief before. And I've been very interested in grief through this whole process of working on Midway. And I came to understand, like for all of my life until recently, I thought grief was a bad feeling. And it's something to kind of, if you feel it, make it go away, because grief is bad. But in the process of grieving for these birds, I discovered that what grief actually is, grief is not the same as despair or sadness. Grief is the same as love. Grief is the love that we feel. It's a felt experience of love for something that we're losing or that we've lost. And so when we grieve, we reconnect with this deep part of ourself where our love resides. And there we are, we're home, and we have access to our wisdom and our compassion. And in that space, we can make new choices.
Question for the founder. Where would you, you've seen what's happened, what you've done in 2 years. I could just imagine where we'll be 2 years from now, maybe 5, 10. Can you give us an idea where you'd like to be, or do you have some sort of timeline in your head or goals with this?
I think first of all we hope that we can create a global consciousness around this issue. We are part of a global initiative called Break Free from Plastic. It's a lot of global organizations working together to create a new storyline and to also to challenge the way the industry is perceiving itself. I mean, we want the industry to move on this issue, and they see it. They see that we need a more circular economy in the future. We need more real sustainable solutions in their industry, and they know that they are under pressure now. So in my world, in 5 or 10 years, we will be a bigger population knowing about the issue, and we'll be able to also move the voters. I think what we should do and what are trying to do is to get this issue high on the political agenda. And if you ask me if I believe that could happen, I mean, if I look at Denmark, I mean, people, they start knitting because they want to produce. They want to support a campaign, so they want textiles with no plastic. So they start knitting. I mean, for me, that's a great answer that people are really ready to do an effort, and that we just, as an organization and as industry and as politicians, we have to advise people what is the best thing to do in the future regarding plastic. So there is a huge job for us still to do to win this one. And I hope we get back someday here in your yacht club, and that we can tell that now we are even more people committed to a future where we live sustainable with plastic.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that we have people like you and the movement, and I feel it, and it's becoming a movement, and there's going to be some change.
Yeah, definitely.
You folks have changed me and affected me and a lot of other people, and we're going to continue that. I'd like to thank you guys for coming out. I'd like to be part of Plastic Change, so anything I could do for you folks, you let me know.
Please have a look at Plastic Change International. If you want to follow us on Facebook, that's possible, and you can look at our website at plasticchange.org to follow us in the future. And thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. Chris, where can everybody find you?
Well, my website is chrisjordan.com, and then my Midway film is coming soon. Stay tuned. You can see the trailer, a little 4-minute trailer, at midwayfilm.com. And just a quick note to all the listeners out there. I know this is not an easy subject to be with. You know, it's uncomfortable. to talk about the problems of our world. And so I thank all of you guys for staying tuned and for hanging in there and engaging, because, you know, we can only do this together. We're all in this machine that we can't really extricate ourselves from it, so we have to be in the paradox.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be with, but you know, the other alternative is to live in denial.
Yeah.
And for me, that's just not acceptable anymore.
I think Chris's pictures, they have made a huge difference regarding this issue, and they will make a huge difference in the future, because they really touch people. And I met a lady on Hawaii. She's working for the Johnson Wana Foundation as a volunteer, and she told me that, look at that picture from Chris of these creatures, I mean, these albatrosses. And she's been working 8 years as a volunteer, and the whole motivation started with these pictures. It's very strong storytelling, and I think it will support the campaign a lot in the future.
You're leaving for Hawaii. This leg is thousands of miles. For any of you who don't know, it's thousands of miles, and there's nothing in between. There's no place to stop off and get something. I've seen the boat. It's an incredible vessel, but I do know there is not a lot of room. You have a lot of gear. You don't have refrigeration that I was able to notice. Are you ready for this? This goes to Chris first. Are you ready for this, Chris? Tight quarters, about 10 people.
Oh man, well, this is the first time I've been on an ocean sailing boat like this, and the first thing that Henrik brought me into the boat, and he said, "This is where you're going to sleep," and he pointed to basically a shelf. And it's about the size of a one-person backpacking tent, except it's about a foot tall. So I don't have room to sit up in there, and I kind of squeezed my way in, and I barely fit, and I started thinking, this might be a really long 3 weeks. But then, you know, people have been sailing for whatever, thousands of years. And I started to think that there's a kind of hardship that goes with the process that's like going backpacking or mountaineering or anything.
Right.
And you just kind of be with that hardship, and it's an adventure. And I have to admit, I'm scared. You know, one of my friends loves to remind me, he says, when you're scared, he said, you're supposed to be scared when you're living your life as an adventure.
Yes.
So when you're scared, that's an indication that you're doing something cool and exciting. So I couldn't be more stoked.
I'm glad I'm staying here. I'll mail a check like the rest of our listeners should do. I mean, if you're not doing this, you're not an adventurer. You can't get on a boat and go thousands of miles, and you can't make the difference like these people are, then you have to help them out. That's what it's about. You're sitting home on your couch watching TV. Everything sounds good. Everybody talks a good game. They want to change the planet. They want to do something. Here's where they can. They could contact Plastic Change International and help fund this thing and help you guys do more.
Great, thanks a lot. We need all the support, because we are in this together, and this project is not going to be stronger than the support we get. So definitely, you're right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And it's as big as you, the listeners out there. You're the people who can make this even bigger and could change the planet and make a difference. Boy, I wish I could hide somewhere in that boat, but there's no place to hide. I looked. There's no, I'm short.
We would love that you were hiding.
I can't hide.
Oh.
I mean, I'm small, I'm short, and there's no place for me on this vessel. You couldn't fit another dozen eggs on that boat. Okay. So. You're listening to Live and On Board with Tony Milazzo. Catch up with me on Twitter and Periscope at TonyMilazzoLive. Email liveandonboardpodcast@gmail.com. And check out our new open group on Facebook, Live and On Board Podcast.